Hello everyone, here is the lesson number 2. So now we start the exercise 1 of the unit 11. So it follows your book. You can check in your book, there is more exercises that I don't ask you to do. So if you want to practice, you're welcome. You can send me anything and I will help you and correct to see if you did well. Alright, so here, exercise 1, the straight line. So we already saw that a straight line is one function and the equation of a straight line is always y equals mx plus c. So the m is the gradient, and the c is the y-intercept. So that is something you should know already. Straight line has a gradient and the point where it crosses the y-axis is the y-intercept. So for this function, y equals 2x plus 3. 2 is the gradient, so the line has a positive gradient, it's inclining. And 3 is the y-intercept. It means that the line crosses the y-axis as y equals 3. Alright. Second one, the green line. As for equation, y equals minus 3x plus 1. The gradient is there minus 3 and the y-intercept is plus 1. So what happened to this graph? This graph is now a straight line declining. The gradient is negative minus 3 and the y-intercept, the point where the line crosses the y-axis, is equal to y equals 1. It's the same value than the c value here. Alright, so that's for straight lines. Now, we saw that a function is a relationship between an x value and a y value. So every time you have an equation, you can find the x or the y by using the calculation of the function. So, to illustrate the next part of this lesson, we're going to use the equation y or f of x equals 2x plus 3. We can use y or f of x, it's the same, it means the same. Y corresponds to the y-axis, the result of that equation, and f of x means the function applied on the x value. Correspond to exactly the same thing. So here, you know the function is 2x plus 3. So it's exactly the same line than the pink one we had above here. Alright, so now the question would be, find f of 2 for this equation. So here, f of x equals 2x plus 3, and you want to calculate f of 2, which means that the x value here, this x is 2. So that's easy, you just substitute the x with a 2 and you calculate the function value. So that would be 2 times 2, because the x is a 2, plus 3. Right, so the function for the x equals 2 equals 4 plus 3. F of 2 equals 7. Alright. And if you wanted to check here for that pink line, f of 2 would be here 7. It's just out of this graph, but if you carried on this line, you would have f of 2 equals 7. Alright. So if they give you the x value, you calculate by substituting the x with this value. Now, on the next page, page 5, another question that they can ask you, it's now, they would do the opposite calculation. They would give you the f of x value or the y value, and you would have to reverse the process to find the x value. So basically the question is, if y equals 1, what was the x value? So now you do the same, But you reverse the process. So you don't substitute the x. Now you change the f of x here. Right, here, this one corresponds now to the f of x. So you still use the equation of the straight line, and you change f of x for 1. So you know now this equation will be equal to 1. And the question is, for which x? So you solve for x in this. Then you would take the 3 over, that would be minus 3 plus 1 equals 2x. That is minus 2 equals 2x. And then you divide by 2 left and right to get minus 1 equal x. And that's your answer. If x is equal to minus 1, the function would give you 1 for result. Alright? You can check that as well on the graph. We said now y is 1 for an x equal to minus 1. So if y is 1, the function has an x of minus 1, which is what we saw in the calculation. Alright, so be careful. If they ask you f of x, you change it in the left hand side and you solve for x. If they ask you f of a specific value, then you change the x for this specific value and you just calculate the result of the equation. Right, so that's our first part on how to work with straight lines. And now we have another point to see for this first lesson, and it's the second one here, domain and range. So the domain and the range works the same for any graph. Can be for straight lines, but it will be the same for parabola, hyperbola, everything. So let's first read the definition as written in the lesson. The domain is the interval on the x-axis where the function exists, which means it's not undefined or not restricted. So domain, x-axis. The second one is the range. The range is the interval on the y-axis where the function exists or where it's not undefined or restricted. The range gives the maximum and the minimum value of your equation, of your graph. Okay, so let's explain that with this graph. It's exactly the same than this one you have in your lesson. Alright, so we have an equation now of y equals 2x minus 1. So that's a straight line. Y equals mx per c. The gradient is 2, inclining line, and the y-intercept is minus 1, which is where it crosses the y-axis. Alright, so that's fine. Now, you see the line is not unlimited. It's not pointing with arrows on both sides. Here, they defined restrictions. So on the right hand side you have a full dot, and on the left hand side you have a white circle. What does this mean? Alright, so let's start with our domain. The domain, like we said, is read on the x-axis. So where does the line exist? So it starts here and it goes up to this point here. Alright, if I go left, I don't have lines anymore, and if I go more right, I don't have lines anymore. So on the x-axis, the domain stops between those 2 points. You see, I read on the x-axis from here up to there. So that is my domain on the x-axis. So what is the minimum value of the x-axis here? It's minus 1. So the domain of this one is read on the x-axis, so I will write x is element of the interval starting from -1, and it's a white circle, which means it's excluding -1, so I'm using a soft bracket. And on the x-axis there is line here, there is line there, up to 3. After 3 there is nothing drawn here anymore, so I'm stopping at 3. Because it's a black dot, then I'm including 3. So the domain is read on the x-axis, and it starts for this one from -1 excluded up to 3 included. So that's domain on the x. Now I'm going to do the same with the range. So the range is the same technique, same method, but it's on the y-axis. So here, what is my maximum on the y-axis? Here. Above that black dot, I don't have line anymore. And the minimum on the y-axis is there. Below that white circle, the line is not drawn. So here I'm going to read the range corresponding to the y values. So that will be the range of this specific line. So now I need to have the answer. The range is written for y. So y is element of. The minimum is -3. And it corresponds to the white circle, so it's excluded. It goes up to all there, up to 5. And the 5 is a black circle, so it's included. Alright, so the range on the y-axis from -3 up to 5. Alright, so that's the second one. Now, you've got two examples, example 1 and example 2. So I'm just going to read it with you. Here the question would have been, sketch the equation y equals -x for x greater than -3. Alright, so you would sketch the graph of y equals -x using the table method. You choose a few values for x and you calculate the few values for y. Then you plot your points and you draw your line. Now the only thing you have to be careful of is x is only greater than -3. So you're not going to draw a full line pointing with arrows on both sides. You have a restriction. X is greater than -3. So here, on the x-axis, -3 is here. And you want x only greater than. So it's going to the right-hand side. So you start your graph at -3 with a white circle, because the sign is strictly greater. It's not equal as well. So white circle on the -3 for x, then the line of y equals -x, and on the right hand side you have no restriction. It's gonna here carry on up to infinity, so you just write an arrow on the right hand side. Alright, the example 2, you have an equation, but this equation is not exactly as you expect it to be. It's not written as y equals mx plus c. So before you can start drawing your graph, you must be careful and write it properly as y equals mx plus c. To make sure that you understand that, you're going to take your book, your impact book, unit 11, be careful where you open your book, and you check for the exercise 1, you do question 1.1, 1.3 and 1.4, and you send me a picture of that. Okay, it's due for Tuesday because Monday is Easter. Enjoy, bye bye.